Guibh go léir accordia agus tá fáilte rót. Welcome to Be My Guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lear Media TV, supporting the Samaritans, Limerick and Tipperary. And my lovely guest today is Jennifer Moran-Stritch from Limerick Institute of Technology, otherwise known as LIT. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello, Mary. Happy St. Patrick's Day too.
And many happy returns back to you, Jennifer. We met some time ago. You were on another show with me a few years ago, and
That's
I
right.
remember we met meeting for coffee afterwards.
Yep.
But just to give you a little bit of a background of Jennifer, she's a social worker by training with an interest in how people create meaning in life and manage experience of loss and grief. And of course, in the last 10 years, she's worked as a lecturer and researcher at the Department of Applied Social Sciences and Social Sciences Connections at LIT. Her area of interests include thanatology, active aging, and gerontology, and how individuals, especially those from marginalized groups in society, encounter trauma and loss and learn to survive and thrive. Recently, she's been working on Death Cafe Limerick events, creating opportunities for people to come together, talk about death in all its aspects in life, and eat cake. And apparently this is to do with the franchise, Death Cafe franchise movement, that you're required to eat cake when you're talking about death. And of course, I'll give you the contact details for Jennifer later in the program. But hello, Jennifer, again.
Hello, Mary. How are you?
That's such a resume.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one. Yeah, not everyone's cup of tea or slice of cake, but there you go.
Yeah, we're going to start with that. Why death and cake?
Oh, well,
it's like an oxymoron, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? Yeah. That goes back to the gentleman who founded the Death Cafe movement. And now I think when he started it, he had no idea that it was going to turn into a movement. And I don't know how much I love that word, but maybe practice is a better word. But he was a gentleman named Bernard Crotaz, Swiss philosopher and sociologist. And his feeling was that people didn't talk about death comfortably enough. It didn't come up in polite conversation. It was seen as something that, you just wouldn't discuss. And so he decided to throw a small party in the kitchen of his apartment in Paris and invite a few friends over. And the only rules were that they were going to talk about their mortality, all aspects of it, ask any questions, make any comments that they wanted to, but they were going to have a little party while they did it. And they were going to celebrate the idea that each of our individual lives are in fact finite. And, we can take into consideration people's religious beliefs or beliefs about an afterlife, but we could probably all agree that no matter what our afterlife or religious beliefs might be, that we can hone in on kind of one finite experience of our lives today. So we can kind of agree on that. And he said that needs to be celebrated, not mourned over, that we need to see it as a unique opportunity and celebrate it. So that's where he said cake should be at every Death Cafe.
I wonder, is it a cultural thing where people, some cultures or some people like to look on death as just another process into another life, and therefore something that needs to be celebrated rather than their life needs to be celebrated, where for many other cultures, grief is very much part of the culture, and wailing and almost professional people crying at funerals and that. I wonder, is it something that is very much something that wouldn't translate to every culture, this Death Cafe?
Oh, yeah. I think, it's a varied experience, and you're right, may not may not kind of strike a chord with every culture, may not be seen as something that's sort of needed or helpful or, I don't know, therapeutic in some way in every culture. But it certainly seems to strike a chord with some people who are in our culture. Even though, you know, the Irish are always seen as very death and funeral friendly, I think that we can make the argument that they're death and funeral friendly for a kind of a very short and limited period of time, but maybe not so good at the stuff that can happen before a death, and maybe not so good at what happens in terms of grief and supporting grief. So I do think death cafes can open up some conversations for people and make it a little bit easier to sort of contend with difficult topics, you know.
Yeah, I do
and
think
cake never hurts.
No,
No?
well, no, not
Yeah.
indeed. But I do think as a society, we are very good at being there for people on the day, around the time, for maybe a week or two afterwards. And in many aspects, we're not very good at commiserating with people. Maybe a month afterwards, if we meet someone in the street, we find it very difficult to say, "Look, I'm really sorry for what happened," and God forbid you should actually, someone should say, "How are you?" And you should dare to say, "Well, I'm not really good," or you would cry in front of them. You'd want, it's the rare person and the rare occasion I think that would actually say, "Come on, let's go for a cup of coffee with you." Because sometimes I think afterwards that it's not on the day or the day after or even the week after it, but it's the month after when everything starts to hit you, what's happening and just how alone you actually are. And nobody wants to talk about it because they think, oh, you know, talking about it is going to prolong it. And often they're more uncomfortable about how it makes them feel rather than how it makes the person feel.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think also that, you know, when you experience a loss, your whole world shifts. You know, I can't remember the name of the poet, but you know, there's that poem, "Stop All the Clocks."
Yeah. It's Jane Auden.
You'll know. Yeah. That's right, Auden. You know, your whole world has shifted on its axis. But like, to the outside world, their life has gone on. You know, they haven't had this rupture. So I think sometimes when you're in early grief, you're thinking like, well, how could you see, like, you know, I'm seeing the world in a completely different way. Like I have completely different lenses on in my glasses. And how can you be going about your normal way of life? How can you be laughing about something? How can you be, you know, enjoying a party or enjoying a wedding or just getting on with life when I'm still stuck here in this? Can you not see me in my?
And as well as that, sometimes when you find yourself against your better wishes laughing at something a month later, and you almost feel yourself guilty for having laughed. Why did I laugh? Why did I find that funny? This immense guilt comes over you. I've lost you. You've lost everything, or that was ever meaningful to you, and yet you can laugh at something that somebody says, and you inadvertently laugh, and then you say, you feel absolute guilt-ridden for having expressed any bit of joy. And you're wondering where that joy came from in the midst of such immense sorrow. I don't think anybody, I've interviewed so many Holocaust survivors and children of Holocaust survivors, and I'm completely struck by the grief process that the survivors and their children, more so. I interviewed an Auschwitz survivor. His daughter was with him. The grief that was racked on her face was palpable. because she was constantly, her whole life, trying to find his world,
Yeah.
a world he was trying to forget.
Yeah.
So that grief continues.
Yeah.
And it sometimes is even stronger for the person who's watching on, their
Yes.
loved one
Yeah.
grieving
Yeah. Yeah.
silently.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think I'd be a firm believer in the intergenerational kind of burden that can be passed on.
Yeah.
I would have to believe that that has to connect in somewhere to the Irish experience from the 1840s on.
Does.
And I think, you know, the potato famines of the 1840s were preceded by being colonized, you know, by the English.
Practicing your religion and having an education, all
Yeah.
the things that I suppose the Jewish situation, the Jewish Holocaust, there's, you know, there's an empathy there. There should be an empathy there, because there's certainly a similarity in experience in the of a group of people who had to hide their identity, hide their religion, hide. Many of them didn't even believe in their religion. They were atheists, but they were um, um, punished because of their ethnicity. Same with the Irish.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why the Irish, I think, can understand it a little bit more, because I think small groups of people who have been persecuted have that kind of experiential empathy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes the way to survive it, we think, is to ignore it or push it away or you know, keep it buried. And as I'm saying that, I can't help but think of, you know, the tomb babies and you know, everything that we are learning painfully and slowly. I think slowly, because it is so painful, about what has gone on with the mother and baby homes, and this, you know, only two or three decades after we came face to face, less than 2 or 3 decades after we came face to face with what happened in the Magdalene laundries and industrial schools. And you know, you have to wonder too, will 2 other women be sitting here in our places in 30 or 40 or 50 years having the same kind of discussions around the direct provision system? And, you know, why didn't people see, and why didn't people change it? And the sorrows that are incumbent upon us from that. So I don't know when we learn or how we learn. But
I mean, I was struck by that. I went out to Knocklashin on one particular day because my dog went missing, and somebody rang me from Knocklashin, a family, to say they thought they had seen him. And I remember going out there, and I remember being struck by the absolute harshness of it, the almost prison-like, with the guard on duty at the main gate. And then when you went in, and they brought me into their home, and it was a one-room house, or one room and one bed, a small little a shared bathroom between everyone inside in that square. And I thought, this was no way in the 20th century at the time. This was no way for any human beings at the end of the 20th century, for any human beings to be living.
Yeah.
You know, and it was just, I just couldn't understand it at all, that that as a society would stand by and allow what seemed to be inhuman. You know, yes, bring people in, yes, find a place for them temporarily until they're processed and it's decided whether to. But nobody should be. This family were 3 years in direct provision, and not 3 years unable to work. 3 years where their lives are just trapped in limbo, basically.
Yeah.
But Jennifer, how did you get into LIT in the first place?
Oh,
What brought you to LIT, and why are you so interested in thanatology and gerontology? What I know what they are, but
yeah, yeah.
what's making you interested in old age and death?
Oh, well, one of them I hope I get to, and the other one I'm so far I've avoided, but who knows? But I know that I'll never avoid it completely. I don't.
None of us get out of here alive.
Yeah, exactly. Who's that? Yeah, Jim Morrison, right? Do you know what? I'll answer the second ones first. In that, I've since I was a little girl, I've just been very, very interested in death. Don't know why. Don't know where it came from. I don't think it was morbid or dark, and I was never really into kind of horror or anything like that. So it didn't come from there. Just interested in how people manage great sadness and great loss, and much of that I think it does come from death, which is this mysterious experience for all of us, and something that we all try to avoid, and yet our lives are marked by it. But also non-death related experiences of loss, like relationships, or like trauma, or job loss, or loss of a role in someone's life, or illness or disability.
Yeah.
I'm really interested. I think not so much in how I'm far more interested in how people survive and thrive, and how they make meaning of it, or how they understand it, and how they go on from it.
I understand that perfectly, Jennifer. That's the area. That's why I do the interviews I do with survivors, how they can find meaning in their lives after. Lots of people talk about the experiences of what happened during and leading up to, but very few people talk to people about what their lives and how they've survived and thrived since.
How do you make sense of all those things? So I don't know. So that the sort of grief and loss and bereavement stuff comes very much from being a very, very young person in that, and it's just continued. And I suppose, like, I've just always wanted to sort of help people. Like I would just want to help people as well as understand what they're going through. And then
does that come from your social work background, or is your social work background a result of being somebody who wanted to care for people?
I think the social work background came second, because I didn't intend to kind of grow up and be a social worker or anything. I thought I don't know, I thought I would be lots of other things, but I sort of almost fell into social work, probably after experiencing the deaths of my parents. Just something, opened up.
Moment, isn't it? It's a profound point in your life.
Yeah, and I was relatively, young. I was like, they had both died by the time I was 20. So it was almost like pathways opened up for me that I perhaps had not recognized before, and I just, kind of went with it. And same kind of thing for moving to Ireland. And I suppose that's how, like, you asked how I started working at LIT, and I think I've been there 13 or 14 years now. Literally, I saw an ad in the paper and said, "Oh, I'll put it advertised. I'll put it an application. I'll put a CV in. Sure, what's the worst that could happen?" And was, consider myself very lucky to have gotten a job there, because I really enjoy it. And you talk about meaning. I get a lot of meaning out of the work that I do there.
Great college.
It really is. It really is. Well, we have three great ones here in Limerick. I think we're steeped in luck.
Yeah.
And each of them
With
have,
four, actually, if you consider the Limerick College of Art and Design, LIT, UL, and Mary Immaculate.
well, I consider LSAD kind of part of LIT because we're kind of cousins. We're more than cousins. We're kind of sister organizations.
Yeah. Art and Design.
Oh,
That's
did ya?
Yeah, and it is part of LIT.
Yeah, yeah.
I always look at it as being a college of design. Then you have the college, LIT, and then you have the university, and then you have Mary Immaculate for teachers.
Yes.
Really.
Yeah.
So, so yeah.
Oh no, very proud of our links and our relationship with Limerick School of Art and Design. I think it's a fantastic place.
There's talks, isn't there, that LIT is becoming a university. Has that borne any fruit, or is?
I think the buds are on the tree and we are just waiting to harvest them because the application is in for the technological university status. And I believe we're supposed to hear this month. And I think certainly our president, Vincent Conan, and, people at the management level are very, very positive about where that application will go. We're going to be joining forces, hopefully, with Athlone Institute of Technology.
Yeah.
To create an as yet unnamed technological university of the Shannon. So they don't have, or I haven't heard the official name yet, but it's something about the Shannon region, because obviously the Shannon River would connect us.
And obviously you can't, neither of you can, well, yeah, it's going to be, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we'll wait for the name.
Our station is called Lear.
Yeah, yeah.
Children of Lear, and to do with flight and everything like that.
But fingers crossed, we will be the third technological university in Ireland, hopefully by the end of this year.
Well, I don't see why they shouldn't, because it has an immense, ever since it started off, as simply a college, and then it became LIT, and once you have the status as a technical university, you'll be able to go as far as masters, isn't it?
Oh, well, we already go to PhD.
Yeah, but okay.
Oh yeah, we have we are graduating and have PhD students in our department now, so we already have that status. Yeah, but it should bring, I think, and I hope that joining forces with Athlone will, better together. I would think that we would have more opportunities, more research opportunities, more funding opportunities. If we can get some synergy, between the two of us, and we would share some programs. So like I teach in the Department of Applied Social Sciences, primarily in social care, and they have a social care program, but they also have nursing, and they also have some other life sciences. So we have some things they don't, and they have some things that we don't. So.
And especially with, UL having the medical center out there, they're teaching the doctors and physiotherapists, and then the nurses, that there could be a kind of a symbiotic relationship between, all the courses and that.
Yeah, one would hope. I
do think it'll happen.
Yeah.
I believe it'll happen.
Well, our fingers are crossed anyway. That's what we've been working towards.
Limerick deserves great things, but what was I going to say to you? Why did you get interested in old age? It seems, to somebody who's not, I understand exactly where you're coming from in that, but to people, to some people that might seem to be very philosophical interests in death and old age and death. Why not youth and life? Do you know?
Yeah, I suppose.
Have you always had a thought for the melancholy? Have you always been melancholic? Because I certainly have. I always prefer the saddest poems and the saddest pieces of music. A real
Yeah.
misery guts when it comes like that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know, because sometimes when people get to know me, they go, "Oh my God, you're far more cheerful than we thought that you were going to be." Uh, I don't know. I just think that they are the really mysterious like parts of life. And I would also say that on a personal level, as a young person, I had several older members of my family. I was really lucky. I had grandparents that I was very, very close to. And then I had aunts and great aunts that I was very close to as well. And they were really a part of kind of our everyday life in our family. And I had really strong relationships with them. And so I've always had an interest or a comfort or an ease with older people, or an
Me
appreciation of
too.
older people.
Me too.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it was because I was an only child and always around my mom's friends and my dad's friends,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
their and aunts and uncles and things like that. Even, I mean, when I lived in England, I was 5 when I came here, and up to then it was all old people in the neighborhood, all retired people. And
Yeah.
coming to Ireland was the first time I'd seen another child,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I've always I like the talking to older people and listening to their
Yeah.
stories, and they
Yeah.
can bring so much. Do you think that our world, it's probably a leading question now, Jennifer, but do you think that we are becoming overly ageist in in society? I mean, I'm thinking of education, I'm thinking of employment, and that where people at 65, I mean, a colleague of mine had to retire from his government job at 65. The man is like a 50-year-old, and even if he wasn't, and he wanted to work until he, whenever, I feel he should be allowed to. I don't feel anybody should be pushed out of their job because they reach a magical age. I mean, because some people at 18 aren't healthy, and some people at 65 are incredibly healthy. So I don't understand the ageism that's in, and
Mhm.
it really, really, it's always jarred with me, I have to be honest with you, because
Mhm.
everything I've ever done, I've done as a mature student.
Mm.
All my
Mm.
education, all everything that I've done has been as a mature student,
Mhm. Mhm.
because
Mhm.
I've never understood this concept of, oh, once you reach a certain age, that's it, give up and go out
Yeah.
to pasture.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd have to say that that I agree with you. And I think, this magical age of 65 probably worked well up until the last 20 years, because our life expectancies were only in our 70s then, late 60s, 70s. So to finish, paid work in the capitalist system at 65 meant that if you were lucky, you'd have maybe 2 or 3 or 4 good years, right, of health, and then you would die, and your retirement savings or your pension would cover whatever financial needs you had during that short period of time. But now our life expectancies are well into our 80s. Infants born today, life expectancy is easily going to be that they will live to be 100. So the notion of sort of cutting off work at age 65 doesn't make financial sense, and like it doesn't make personal sense or
But it
social
doesn't
sense at all.
make intellectual sense either, because there's
Mm,
a wealth of knowledge out there from, say, lecturers and tutors and teachers who are put out, are told basically at 65, you've got to leave now and make way for maybe a younger person who might not necessarily, one, be as interested in the job, or two, have the wealth of knowledge. I mean, this guy I'm talking about at 65, his father's 91 years of age, and he's retired since he was 65, and he's
yeah,
drawing a pension since he was 65, and the man
yeah,
is as fit as a 70-year-old.
yeah,
And
yeah.
obviously his mother only died there recently and she was 92, so
Mm,
longevity is in the family. And
yeah,
and the possibilities are that he could be, he's 67 now, he could still be drawing the pension in 20 years time, you know, or even 30 years time. You know?
And equally, if that is what he wants for his life, I think, and he can make it work financially and in every other way, I think he should have the opportunity to do that.
Leave. Absolutely.
But if he didn't want to, or if he wanted to be able to work part-time in something, I think those options should be there as well. Now, I think we're moving towards that. It's slowly but surely, and
I hope so.
A lot of the reasons why we're doing that is because, you know, companies and the public service realize, you know, we actually need more labor. We're going to run a little bit short of labor. So we need employees, we need workers. So we have to keep people in the loop, you know, up until at least age, you know, probably looking towards age 70. But yeah, I think it should be like anything else. It should be a personal choice about whether or not you want to retire, and that there should be very few, and I think we have to do some more exploring about what retirement really means and what it looks like.
Yeah, because a lot of people, when they're forced to retire, you see them going into a decline because they feel they have no more purpose. And to me, it's counterproductive, because what it's doing is it's killing people emotionally, killing people's, stifling their creativity. You know, people are told, oh, go out and take up hobby, take up painting. But if nursing was what why should a 65-year-old or whatever age person leave nursing if they're good at it? And if they're given their whole life to it? I'd rather a 70-year-old nurse that was caring and compassionate than a 21-year-old or a 22-year-old that was just basically filling in the hours. And as well as that, people are studying now as mature students when they didn't years ago. And you're going into college and you're doing degrees, you're doing MAs or whatever, and you're doing PhDs. And you're saying to yourself as a mature student, well, what are the chances of getting a job after this? Whereas everything starts to increase. People go in looking for to do courses, start to go on the rise as well. Colleges start to do better because people feel, well, you know, even though I'm whatever age you are, that there's a job, there's a possibility of a job. But if you feel, oh, you know, sure, what are you going to get when you're finished? You know, it's only a hobby for you. When you hear these things, and you're anti-ageist, which I am just absolutely shockingly anti-ageist. I can't understand it at all.
Yeah. Well, and you know, like I certainly have these chats with my students as well. You know, there's all different kinds of ageism, and there can be ageism against the young as well, which is deeply unfair, and you know, really just kind of takes stereotypes and labels around things, because certainly I'm lucky enough to be able to share my life with a lot of young people, both personally and in my work, and they are fantastic, and I learn from them every day. But equally, I hear what you're saying about it, the other end of the scale, and certainly we hear the anecdotal stories, and we see the research about the difficulty that if you become unemployed in your 50s, how hard it is to try to find a job, especially a job that is comparable to the job that you might have left or have been forced to leave. And the problem with that, you know, financially and emotionally, it is really challenging for men and women.
Emotionally is almost worse, because you're back to the grieving process again. I actually interviewed a girl the other day who was paralyzed. She, at the age of 34, she suffered a spinal stroke and fell down the stairs. Then she got a second spinal stroke a few months later and a brain bleed. And it was her partner who she met, who was a former England rugby player, who helped her to walk again. Now, admittedly, a lot of her muscles are paralyzed still. She's paralyzed technically from the spine down, but from the T10 down. But she was saying the grief she experienced at losing her walk and not being able to just get up off the chair and run after her 4 children. And her husband had walked out on her that week. And after she was paralyzed, and she was left with 4 children, and her new partner took them all on as his. And they now have another little boy. But she said it's amazing the grief she felt at not being able to just get up and run after the children, that maybe 20 minutes had to be, or an hour had to go into her physio to get her to actually stand.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, all the different levels of grief that people experience, and you know, and losing your job, losing your potential, losing your sense of worth that goes with having a job that you like.
Yeah.
Or being forced out of a job, and you feeling that you're, I could have done this for another 20 years. I love my job, do you know? And
I think it's sometimes in the literature, they call those things all the secondary losses, you know, from the primary loss. And, you know, just to take job loss, like, okay, you're obviously income is your immediate issue. You know, how am I going to pay the mortgage or the electricity bill or buy groceries? But then it's all the other things. It's the, like you said, the sense of purpose, the identity. You know, if I'm not working, then what am I doing? The camaraderie. You know, I know we've been at home in front of computer screens for the most part since March 12th of 2020. And I count myself lucky every day that I have a job where I'm able to go to work, and that I have a purpose, and I have a reason for being there, and I've been able to work, you know, all across that time. But I do miss the people that I share an office with, the people that I'm friends with, and colleagues with at LIT. I miss the students. I miss the people that I see in the canteen. I miss the people that I see in, you know, all the different offices. I miss the people who are the caretakers, and admin and lecturers and, you know, researchers and students and everybody there. So that's part of work too, you know?
Absolutely. But the thing is that as a society, we tend to judge people as well by the fact that whether they have or they haven't a job. And, you know, one of the first things that people will say to you, rightly or wrongly, when, you know, if you went, I remember, you know, you'd go to a dance and you'd get up dancing with somebody, and after 5 minutes, just for something to say, they'd ask you your name and what do you do for a living?
Yes.
And you know, it's the sense of grief as well with that you even your pride is taken away. You've your loss of pride, your loss of self-worth, at being able to say, oh well, I'm in between work. That's you know, and that's the new buzzword for I don't have a job. And so you just kind of, there's so many different ways of looking at grief that people experience throughout their lives, and we tend to look on grief as being the loss of a person through death, but it can be just so many areas of our life that we grieve for. Grieving for your youth, grieving for the person you were, and now look. And when you look in the mirror and you think, oh God, where have I got? There's a movie, As Good as It Gets, with Jack Nicholson.
Yes. Yeah.
And when he's been beaten up, and Simon has been beaten up, and he's in the hospital, and he looks in the mirror and he said, oh dear, where have I gone?
Yeah.
That to me is the definition of grief.
Yeah.
Grieving for who you once were. Not who you now are.
Yeah. You know? And again, in that grief is that almost willful denial or lack of awareness or lack of acceptance of, we all age. None of us, you know, stay 20 forever. We may be 20 inside, we may feel 20, but you know, our body changes, the way we look changes. For some of us it changes more, for some of us it changes less, but you know, aging is real, and maybe not to be despised in sometimes the way that ageism makes us despise aging.
This is it. I think there's nothing more destructive than isms.
Yeah.
Whether it's racism, whether it's ageism, it just eats away at the person more than any mirror will.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you could look in the mirror forever and say to yourself, you know, I'm no longer 19 or 20 or 21. But when somebody tells you to leave a job, like my friend was,
Yeah.
you know, he was in a civil servant,
Yeah.
and I just think that's the most cruel thing in the
Yeah.
world, because
Yeah.
it's basically saying, oh well, you're fine and you're incredibly fit and you're and you look like a 40-year-old physique wise, but you've reached 65 now, so you've got to go.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
since then, they've never been able to replace him in his job.
Okay.
They've
Okay.
never had, they've had a few young people who just came for a couple of days and then they
Sure.
just left and they moved out of the
And
country.
it wasn't for
And,
them. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah, I think when you're right, when anything like that becomes institutionalized, or sort of becomes that there's a policy or the law of the land in which it says we accept this idea that we're going to place a limit on you because of your chronological age, not your ability, not your capacity, not your experience, not your willingness to do the job. You know, it's not about your ability. It's simply based on this number that people have no
the
control
number.
over. It is a little bit, I do think it's changing. I think we're becoming more aware of it. And I hope we're becoming more aware of it in where ageism sort of intersects with racism and sexism and ableism, and all those other kind of isms, as you say.
Yeah.
So I hope so. I like to think so. We'll keep
Mickey
fighting the
Rooney
fight
said
anyway.
Mickey Rooney said it right when he said age is only an experience.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be getting rid of the most experienced in favor of the least experienced and hoping that the least experienced will work as hard as the most experienced, then you're taking big chances. Do you know, in my view. But tell me about your sorry for your loss.
Oh,
Dot.
yeah. Right. Well, I suppose it's kind of connected to what we've been talking about. So, I mean, I think all of us can agree that the past year has been just,
Horrific. And annus horribilis.
yes. Yeah. I mean, there are too many words to describe it, and there are no words to describe it. And so the Irish Hospice Foundation and the Creative Ireland program wanted to get people in the communities in Ireland to start thinking about ways that that we could kind of creatively acknowledge and pay our respects to the grief that people are experiencing because of COVID-19 and because of other things. So they put out some seed grants, and was lucky enough to get one of them. And along with my colleagues, Yanchin Schoenmakers and Dave O'Neill, both of whom are from Limerick City Community Radio, we put together a website called sorryforourtroubles.ie. So it's literally just that, sorryforourtroubles.ie. And
Who did you do it with, did you say?
Yanchin's Schoenmakers and Dave O'Neill from Limerick City Community Radio, but also with help from eLive Business Solutions in Limerick, and also Death Cafe Limerick, and the Loss and Grief Research Group at LIT. So this is how it works. If there's anything that you or anyone else anywhere in the world has been grieving, feels a sense of loss over. It could be something or someone that you've lost in this 12-month period, or it could be a grief or a loss that existed before.
Yeah.
You just talk about it in a voice message and you WhatsApp it to us, and we turn it into an image by using sound wave technology. And then the image is posted on our website, www.sorryforourtroubles.ie.
So you're making you're actually dimensionalizing a person's grief.
Yeah, making it, kind of, I like to think of it as kind of like almost transforming it into something that is, yeah, and possibly beautiful.
Yeah, because sometimes, when somebody expresses their grief or when somebody experiences grief, it's not tangible. It's something that is just innate to them, and and trying to paint a picture of my personal grief will be a different picture than your personal grief, and you could be grieving the very same person at the same time, but your sense of that grief is so manifestly different from my sense of the grief. But when you actually put it into into a way that it can actually be almost drawn, if you like, or given a form, rather than a feeling.
Yeah. So that's what we've done, and the voicemail messages are anonymous. We have a confidential, dedicated phone number, which I can share with you as well. And we then post these images on our website, and then there's also a section where if people who are looking at the website and kind of looking at the gallery of images feel inclined, they can leave a message about the images. They can express condolences. They can express solidarity. They can say, I'm going through that too. Whatever it is they want to react to the images that they see. So I think we're hopeful that this would be an opportunity for people to be able to voice their grief privately in a private message, but then sort of, like you said, put it out there in an image and make it something real for other people to see and acknowledge that they feel seen and heard. And that's why we came up with the title, Sorry for Our Troubles. Because so often, you go to removals or wakes or funerals, and you say to the person, I'm sorry for your trouble. And I had never heard that phrase before I moved here, because it wouldn't be a phrase.
Originally from Connecticut.
Yes. Yeah. So like, I would never have been familiar with that in the States. That just wasn't a thing that we said to each other about it. And I was really struck by it. And it's always stuck in my mind. But it's always very much, I am sorry for your trouble.
Yeah.
But I think the last year has shown us that we have collective troubles, and that grief, while it's a very individual thing in our society, is also a very shared thing.
And even within that shared sense of grief that we all have, we're all, I suppose, in some respects, we're grieving our freedom at the moment, but we're all grieving a collective sense of grief for our freedom. However, again, all our senses of grief manifest differently. And when it's articulating that into a WhatsApp message, which then becomes, you see the individuality of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it is combined, but just as we're all part of the human race, the singular human race, we're all very much individual. And it's back to what, when you hear people saying, oh, she's different, or he's different, he's a foreigner, or she's a foreigner. At the end of the day, we're all foreign. We're even foreign to ourselves, because the person I show myself to be to you might be a completely different person to somebody else. They might see me in a completely different light. So Derrida says, to understand the other, you've got to first understand the other within yourself, because you're made up of so many different others trying to show this person to them, and this part of me to somebody else, and that part of me to somebody else. So, I mean, even within this globe of grief and loss, we're all individually struggling differently, and
Yeah.
it's a wonderful concept. It's
Yeah.
very, very different.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, we've only just started it last week, and we're really looking for submissions from anywhere in the world, and like, it is free. And the phone number is 083 028 5415. That's the
We'll
WhatsApp
hang on
number.
at the end. We'll hang on at the end of the show, and you can give me all the details.
Super. But we'll take, it's curated too. So we just didn't want people to feel like, well, I'm putting this message out there, and then who's listening to it, or how will it be used, or what if they don't get it, or every single message that we get is listened to and is turned into an image. And then we also put some text on top of the image, so that people looking at the image will know what the image entails, what the person was speaking out about. But we do that in a safe and confidential way, so that
And
no
how
one
does
is
that
identified.
image, and how it does that image, if you like, manifest itself? In what way is an example of the
It's
image?
in sound waves.
Sound waves.
In sound waves, yeah. So you can actually go to the website and just click through and see the different images. And it's you'd know this a lot better with your experience in radio and media, but if someone has a very low voice, the waves will be very low, and if somebody talks sort of quite musically, you have different shapes that are created. And yeah, it's
And when you're talking about certain aspects of your grief, your voice changes as well,
Yeah.
to reflect that
Yeah.
sense of grief. And
Yeah.
it's amazing. It's an amazing concept.
Yeah. Well, it's free, and we would hope, we have it up for the month of March. And again, we've been very, very lucky with the seed grants from Irish Hospice and from Creative Ireland programs, and also the help from eLive in Limerick. But we would hope to kind of keep it up on a permanent basis and let people keep sending us things. I mean, we're not out of the woods yet with this COVID-19, and I think people need a space to be able to grieve their grieve things, and be seen and be honored and be responded to in that. So maybe this little project will go some way to do that.
And it's not just people who are on their own who need that. Sometimes, very often, people who are actually in large families or in isolation, maybe with an abuser, who they've never been, now can't get away from the abuse 24/7, and nobody really talks about that. They talk about stay home, stay safe. But what if home is the place that you're trying to escape from?
Yeah.
Because it's the least safe place that you have.
Yeah. I think, I don't know what you think about this, but I think COVID has unearthed or excavated so many things in our society, in our lives, from our families all the way up to our government and our global institutions, that are good and solid and healthy and have kept us going. But it's also shown a light on all the cracks in our society. And like, when we are out of this, we have to remember where the cracks are so that we can repair them. Do you know? We can't forget.
Yeah, it certainly has shown up, but it certainly has shown up the division that is there between. But it's also shown up I'm a great believer in people being given a voice and allowed to speak. Whether whether you agree with a person or not, I think people are still going to think what they think. And if you silence somebody because you disagree with them, you're only silencing their ability to speak, but you're not getting at the root of why they think like that, or why they don't think like that, or why they disagree with you. The only way I think, as a healthy society, that we're ever going to understand each other, understand the reasons behind the isms, if you like, is by sitting down and having healthy, robust dialogue with one another, in which you say, I respectfully disagree with what you're saying, 100%, and here is why. But I think we've lost that ability as a society. I think society now is either thinking in the lines of left wing or right wing. There's no such thing as I'm right in the middle. I can see your point of view. I actually agree with you on that, but I absolutely agree with you on that as well. And why can't you be on both sides of the seesaw?
Yeah.
And I think through dialogue and having more, allowing people more discussion, allowing us to hear voices that we wouldn't ordinarily hear, I think gives us a much deeper understanding of why people think like that, and how you can help them. You can change their mindset, maybe, or they can change yours in a healthy way.
Yeah. And leave room for the possibility that you and I, just taking two examples, can have different mindsets. And that is okay. I don't need to change you, and you don't need to change me.
Absolutely.
We need to just coexist. We need to respect each other.
We need to understand. We need to say, absolutely.
Yeah.
I hear where you're coming from. I profoundly disagree with you. But as Voltaire said, or well, it was attributed to Voltaire, I disagree with what you say, but I defend to the death your right to say it.
Yeah.
If we talk about allowing people to have freedom of speech in society, then we have to allow for the voice that you absolutely abhor, but you want to talk to them to find out why they think like that, and have a discussion about it. If you silence them and stop them talking, they're still going to think like that.
Yeah. And probably be more defended around it, and be more be less willing to trust and less willing to collaborate. And that's I think that can be really hard to do, because so much of the way that we get information has changed over the last probably decade to 2 decades, in that we get a lot of our information in silos, so we only hear what we want to hear. We only get news from certain news outlets. We only follow certain Twitter accounts. We get this bubble, and sometimes we lack the emotional and intellectual muscles to be able to be like, well, there's somebody that believes differently than I do, has different political leanings or political stance than I do. But you know what? I can see the goodness in them. I can see the value in what they're saying. I don't agree with it, but
no, I mean, I think CNN and Fox would be an example of what I look on. When you look in America and you say to yourself, and you look here at our RTE and that, and it's only a certain group of people that will ever get a voice on these news stations, and you don't hear the alternate voice on things. And you're there and you're saying, why can't you hear somebody on that absolutely profoundly disagrees with somebody else? And you're there and you're listening to the two arguments, and you're saying to yourself, well, I actually agree with both of them on different stances, but I profoundly disagree with them both in different areas. And nothing's straightforward and black and white. And I think a lot of our society today tends to be trying to pigeonhole us into either black or white.
Yeah.
And we're not black and white people. There's so much gray area. There's so much tint in the coloring that you can agree with two sides on a lot of aspects without being pigeonholed. I hate the phrases right wing, left wing, or or woke, or Do you know, I just,
Yeah.
they to me are pigeonholing people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But listen, Jennifer, we could be talking forever.
We could. Yeah. 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 This could
But
go on well into the evening, Mary.
well into the evening, the philosophical musings.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love your mug.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my favorite mug as well, I have to say.
Lovely colouring. But what was I going to say to you? If you stay on the line after, and I'll get the information from you and I'll
Super.
put it up.
Perfect.
Well,
Thank
Sin Dara leis an Clare, that's the end of the show for today. Until the same time, or until the next time, if you like, Lacuna of Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day, loyal pádraig to everyone out there. Sin Dara leis an Clare agus go dté sibh slán.